Don't come home for Christmas. You'll embarrass us. That was the message. They didn't even bother to call. Snow pushed softly against the window pane, blurring the outside world into watercolor smears of white and gray. Inside, I was bent over my kitchen counter, threading a silver ribbon through the corners of crisp wrapping paper. It was a vintage fishing lure I'd found online, a rare one Dad had mentioned once when we were still speaking in full sentences. The tag I'd written simply read, Dad. I tied the knot tighter than necessary, more muscle memory than sentiment, humming along with a Nat King Cole song coming from my laptop. The message buzzed through at 5:43 p.m. I didn't recognize the tone at first. It was almost too simple, too sterile. Don't come home for Christmas. You'll embarrass us. No punctuation, just a hard line of rejection from a woman who once corrected my grammar in birthday cards. It was followed 30 seconds later by a text from Brandon. A laughing emoji, a Christmas tree, and the words, LOL awkward. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because the words in my head felt heavier than they would on the screen. I wasn't sure I could trust myself to speak without cracking open. This wasn't the first cold snap from my family, just the clearest. I put down the phone and went to wash my hands. The ribbon's shimmer looked ridiculous now, too hopeful. I dried my palms on the dish towel, then reached for my laptop, more out of instinct than curiosity. I told myself I wouldn't check Facebook. But then I did. There they were. The Deloqua family tree posed perfectly in front of the fireplace. Brandon in a deep green sweater, Heather standing neatly beside him, her hand on Dad's shoulder. Mom held a wine glass, mid-laugh. I used to stand between Dad and the mantel, second from the left. Now Heather stood there like she'd always belonged. The caption read, "Grateful for warmth, tradition, and chosen family this year." I didn't feel rage, not yet. Only the kind of stillness that arrives when something breaks too cleanly to make a sound. I clicked through the album. Heather helping Mom with cranberry sauce. Heather holding the family dog. Heather's name tagged in every photo. Mine? Not once. Not even the ones from last year had my name anymore. Someone had untagged me. Or maybe they'd never tagged me to begin with. The silver ribbon on the counter gleamed like it was mocking me. In the past, I would have called Aunt Janine. I would have told her about the text, the photos, asked for some anchor to keep from floating away. But she passed 2 winters ago. Lorraine, Grandma, was the last one who never made me feel like a footnote. There was a photo of her, too, buried deeper in my Google Photos. Me and her on the porch, steam curling from matching mugs, my head tucked close to hers. She had knitted me a red scarf that year and called me the only Deloqua with a backbone. I hadn't thought about that line in years. I closed the laptop. My apartment felt colder now, like the furnace had forgotten me too. I took the fishing lure, unwrapped it, and placed it back into the small velvet box it came in. Then I climbed onto the step stool and tucked it into the top shelf of my closet. Behind the fall sweaters. Behind last year's ornaments. Just behind. I didn't cry. Instead, I went back to the kitchen and unplugged the twinkle lights, one bulb at a time. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived from Charles Whitmore Estate Law. Her name's handwritten on the front. Your grandmother passed on November 12th. The words landed like sleet. Cold, sudden. And no one told her. The envelope was thicker than any mail I'd received in months. It bore no holiday stamp, no cheerful slogan, just embossed lettering and the heavy weight of something meant to be taken seriously. I'd almost tossed it aside, assuming it was more junk or a delayed insurance ad, but my name was written in cursive. Not a printed label, a real pen, a real person. Inside was a letter from a firm in Hartford. A Mr. Charles Whitmore requested my presence regarding the estate of Lorraine Deloqua, my grandmother. I blinked, scanned the date again. November 12th, nearly 6 weeks ago. The letter had been dated a few days earlier. No call, no text. No obituary forwarded from my family. My pulse picked up as if some part of me had been waiting for this moment, even if I hadn't known it. Lorraine was gone. But the world hadn't stopped. My family hadn't told me. They'd hosted their photo-perfect Christmas gala and set a place for someone else while burying the one person who ever truly saw me. And they hadn't said a word. I called the number. The voice that answered was calm, measured. Charles Whitmore speaking. This is Natalie Deloqua. I got your letter. There was a beat of silence, not surprise, just patience. Yes, Ms. Deloqua. Your grandmother specified that we reach out to you directly. She suspected your family might delay the news. I sat down without realizing it. My chair let out a soft groan. Did she leave a will? She did, he said gently. She also recorded a video. I think it's best you see both in person. 2 days later, I sat in an oak-paneled office that smelled faintly of lemon oil and dust. A cup of untouched tea rested on a coaster in front of me. Whitmore was everything you'd expect a man named Charles Whitmore to be. Bow tie, trimmed beard, the kind of posture that belonged to old photographs and courtrooms. He slid a leather folder across the table. Inside were copies of the death certificate, property documents, bank holdings. But my eyes locked on the USB drive clipped to the flap. May I? I asked. He nodded. Of course. The laptop screen flickered to life. The moment Lorraine appeared, I forgot to breathe. Her silver hair was tied back. She wore a plum sweater I remembered buying with her the last time I visited. Her eyes, always sharp, were a little softer now, but no less certain. If you're seeing this, Nat, she began, then I've died, and I suspect your parents didn't tell you, which means I was right. Her smile was sad but steady. I made changes to my will 3 years ago. Your mother took advantage of me when I was recovering from surgery, used my power of attorney to borrow against my house. Said it was for Brandon's business. I let it slide. Then she did it again. That's when I took everything back. She went on, listed dates, showed documents, made jokes even. She was tired, yes, but lucid. Fiercely herself. You always came to visit, Nat. You never asked for anything. You just showed up with cinnamon cookies and that ridiculous travel mug. So I'm giving you what I can. The house, the investments, the heirlooms, everything. With love. And with the hope you'll know even if they won't say it. You were the only one who never asked me to prove I mattered. The screen went dark. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. She meant that, Whitmore said quietly. She updated the documentation herself with a notary and 2 independent witnesses. My voice cracked. Did they really not include me in the obituary? He slid a newspaper clipping forward. I scanned it. Lorraine Deloqua, 89, passed peacefully on November 12th. Survived by her son Frank Deloqua, daughter-in-law Denise, grandson Brandon. No mention of me. Nothing. She also instructed me to give you this, Whitmore added. Another envelope. Inside, the porch photo. Me and her, laughing over matching mugs. They erased me from her ending. They planned to let her pass into history without me. But she hadn't let them. I stared out the window for a long time before I finally spoke. They thought I wouldn't find out. Whitmore didn't answer. He didn't need to. I straightened my coat, pocketed the USB, and stood. They buried her, I said quietly. Then buried the truth. Charles didn't stop me as I walked toward the door. You don't have to tell them, he said behind me. But if you do, Christmas would be a fitting time. She was not invited. She would not RSVP, but she would arrive with the truth. Snow hadn't let up since morning. It coated the sidewalks of Elmwood Court like white velvet, crisp and unspoiled. The Deloqua estate glowed with golden light beneath a sky the color of slate. Every window warm, every bush wrapped in twinkle lights like carefully curated joy. A valet took my coat without a word, his face blank, but his eyes lingered just a moment longer than necessary, probably wondering why I was there. I didn't offer an answer. Inside, laughter bloomed like perfume. False, practiced, expensive. The scent of nutmeg and ambition floated from the dining room. Guests in satin dresses and tailored jackets sipped from champagne flutes, not knowing the floor beneath them was built on omissions. I moved through the entry like a shadow, nodding politely, smiling just enough to blend. The last time I stood here was 5 years ago, when Grandma Lorraine was still hosting. She hated formal events but loved feeding people. I could still hear her laugh echoing through the stairwell when someone dropped an hors d'oeuvre tray. Now, the laughter was thinner, less real. In the center of the living room, Denise stood beside a marble fireplace, her hair swept into a soft chignon, pearls at her neck. Brandon leaned against the piano, arm curled around Heather, who wore the red cocktail dress I saw on Instagram last week. Dad, Frank, was seated on the edge of a velvet settee, eyes glassy but not yet drunk. Heather was the first to spot me. Her expression froze, unsure whether to signal alarm or pretend it was normal. She chose the latter. Brandon noticed her stiffening and followed her gaze. His jaw twitched. "What the?" Denise turned around slowly, as if her body resisted the reality unfolding behind her. I didn't stop walking. "Hello, Mother." "Natalie," she said through a tight smile. "This is unexpected." "I imagine so," I said, reaching into my bag. "But then again, so was Grandma's death." Frank shifted in his seat. Brandon scoffed, already preparing something cruel. I ignored them all. Denise recovered faster than I anticipated. "Natalie, this isn't the time." I cut her off, calm and measured. "You said tonight was about honoring family legacy." I placed the leather envelope gently on the mantel beside a garland of cranberries. Then, from my coat pocket, I withdrew the small projector. Whitmore had helped me load the video file. I clicked it on, pointing at the empty stretch of wall behind the dining table. The room dimmed slightly. The crowd went silent. Lorraine's face appeared, bright and deliberate. "If Natalie is hearing this, it means they didn't tell her I died." Someone gasped. "I updated my will 3 years ago after your mother used my trust to pull out a loan in Brandon's name. I revoked her power of attorney. I made sure Natalie would be protected. If they're surprised to see you, dear, it's because they plan to make you disappear." Murmurs broke out across the room. Someone's champagne flute slipped from their fingers and shattered. "I love you," Lorraine said. "I see you, and I'm sorry I couldn't stop them from trying to erase you, but I can give you this." The screen faded to black. The silence that followed was vast. Denise's face had gone gray beneath her powder. Brandon looked like he wanted to punch something. Heather was still staring at the wall. Denise cleared her throat. "There are complexities." "Save it," I said, turning toward the door. Frank stood up, reaching out. "Natalie?" I looked at him. "Don't." And then, loud enough for the entire room, "You forgot a piece of that legacy." No one followed me. The cold air outside was a relief after the heat of all those eyes. As I descended the steps, I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. Denise begins to speak, but Natalie calmly says, "Save it for court or for your conscience. Whichever still works." "You weren't supposed to embarrass us." Natalie smiled. "Then maybe you should have been better people." The room they chose for the confrontation was the drawing room off the east hallway, far enough from the main gala floor that no stray guests could hear, yet still close enough for control. Denise had always been strategic that way. There was a fire crackling in the hearth, half-hearted and decorative, and a silver tray of untouched petit fours sweating on crystal. Everything else in the room felt brittle, staged, fragile. I sat across from them, Denise on the brocade love seat, Brandon leaning against the windowsill, arms crossed, and Dad in the corner, nursing a scotch he hadn't yet tasted. Heather hovered by the door, hands clasped in front of her like a stagehand forgotten on set. Denise was the first to speak. I understand that you're upset, she began, tone clipped but measured. And I acknowledge that we should have handled things differently. I said nothing, just tilted my head. But Lorraine wasn't in her right mind toward the end, she continued. You know how she could be. Stubborn, sentimental, easily misled. Easily misled? I echoed softly. Is that what we're calling her clarity now? Brandon cut in, impatient. Come on, Nat. She always favored you. It was obvious. You're acting like you earned any of this. My gaze settled on him, unflinching. Earning wasn't part of the game, was it? It was just about who could stay close enough to benefit. He bristled. You left. I left to survive, I said. Denise shifted in her seat, putting on the well-worn mask of reason. This doesn't have to be combative. We could sit down, figure out a way to divide the estate. The house, the investments. Split evenly, perhaps. Keep things in the family. The family that erased me from a funeral? I asked. From her obituary? Frank finally cleared his throat. We thought it would be easier. For everyone. I stared at him like he was a stranger. Denise pushed forward. The videos were one-sided. You have to admit they don't reflect the full picture. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I didn't throw it. I didn't shove it. I simply placed it on the coffee table between us like a line being drawn. 3 years ago, I said. Signed, notarized, witnessed. Lorraine revoked the power of attorney you used to drain her equity. Then she transferred everything. To me. No one moved. She wasn't confused, I added. She was exhausted. Of being used, Brandon scoffed. So now what? You're going to what? Kick us all out? Make a big show? I looked at him for a long moment. I already did. Denise sat back, eyes narrowing. If you think this makes you look good, Natalie, you're wrong. People talk. They'll see this for what it is, a grab. I laughed. Quiet. Real. You mean like what you tried to do? With silence and edits and deleted names? The fire popped, the only sound for a few long beats. Frank shifted in his chair. Maybe. Maybe we could find a solution that honors everyone. I turned to him. You want legacy? Here's what legacy looks like. Someone choosing to be seen before it's too late. Someone telling the truth even when the rest of you insist on erasing it. No one answered. I stood, gathered my coat, reached for the folder again, then paused. Instead, I left it. Keep it, I said. You'll need it more than I do. Brandon muttered something under his breath. Denise stood. If you walk out now... Heather touched her arm. Don't. I looked at them one last time. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I refuse to disappear. Then I turned and walked away. As I exited the hallway, Heather gently touched my arm and whispered, I didn't know they'd kept it from you. Thank you for not letting them pretend. They filed a legal complaint. The court dismissed it in 5 minutes. Back in Albany, the snow hadn't melted, but something in me had. The sharpness I carried into the confrontation at the estate had cooled into something steadier, quieter. I wasn't vibrating with adrenaline anymore. I wasn't waiting for anyone to understand. My phone buzzed as I stepped out of the post office, a soft trill against my palm. The name on the screen read, Charles Whitmore. Miss Deloqua, he said when I answered. You'll be pleased to know the probate court denied the challenge outright. No deliberation? None. The documents were ironclad. The judge called the video testimony unusually compelling. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since Christmas Eve. Thank you, I said. You're welcome, he replied. And congratulations. Officially, everything now belongs to you. That night, I stood in the middle of my tiny kitchen, mug of tea in hand, and stared at the wall across from me. It was bare. Just soft cream paint and the shadow of where a framed photo used to hang. I didn't feel like putting anything back. Not yet. The next day, a reporter from a local lifestyle blog reached out. They'd heard whispers of a family dispute, a mysterious video played at a Christmas gala. I nearly declined, but then thought of Lorraine, her voice steady on screen, calling things what they were. So I agreed. The article ran under the headline, "A Legacy Rewritten? Granddaughter Inherits Estate After Family Cover-Up." It wasn't tabloid. It was tender, honest. The writer didn't sensationalize anything, just told the truth as it had unfolded. I liked that. Lorraine would have too. By the third day, my inbox had shifted from silence to static. Distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years sent clumsy apologies. If I'd known, that must have been so hard. "We were told you didn't want to be there." I read them once, then archived them all. The only message I didn't delete came from Heather. "I wanted to say thank you. You didn't have to show up, but you did. And because you did, I saw it too. How quiet their erasing was. How easy." I stared at her words for a long time, then typed, "I didn't do it to teach anyone. I just didn't want to stay erased." On December 28th, I returned to the estate. Not inside, just outside. I parked on the street and walked the perimeter. Lights still flickered behind the windows. Somewhere inside, Denise was probably pacing. Brandon was probably still ranting. Dad, I didn't know. Maybe he'd gone silent again. I stood at the end of the long driveway, snow gathering on my boots, and looked up at the house. The same house where Lorraine used to sit on the porch and say things no one else had the nerve to say. The same house where I was never invited to decorate the tree, but somehow still remembered where every ornament belonged. I didn't knock. Didn't need to. Justice doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it just needs to be complete. When I got home, there was a card slipped under my door. No return address. Inside was a photo. Me and Lorraine on her porch, the one I thought was lost. She was mid-laugh. I was holding her hand. I ran my fingers over the edge of it, lips pressed together. Whoever had sent it didn't leave a note. Just the photo. A holiday card slipped under her apartment door. No name. Inside, a photo of her and Lorraine. One she thought was lost. The house smelled like cider and cinnamon, and for the first time in years, Natalie could breathe. Steam curled above the pot on the stove, filling the kitchen with warmth that wasn't just heat. Real warmth. The kind that lingered in corners and settled in bones. Outside, snow layered gently across the porch railing, the path freshly shoveled by hand that morning. There was no staff, no decorators. Just me, a few friends, and a house that finally felt like it belonged to someone who gave a damn about truth. Lorraine's house, now mine, wasn't perfect. The floorboards creaked, the windows whined when the wind pressed too hard, but it was still here, still standing. And for the first time, so was I. The living room glowed with candlelight and low jazz. A stack of mismatched plates sat on the table. Mia was stringing fairy lights across the windows, humming. Jerome had brought far too much wine and was already testing each bottle for spiritual compatibility. My friends weren't fancy. They didn't speak in legacy or reputation, but they brought laughter. They brought safety. That was more than my family ever did. I carried out a tray of baked brie and set it beside a small frame on the mantel. The photo inside was simple. Just me and Lorraine on her porch, a mug in each hand, both of us caught mid-laugh. I hadn't added any caption. I didn't need to. Before dinner, I raised a glass and gave a short toast. To those who saw us when others didn't. Glasses clinked. Laughter rippled. Someone played Nat King Cole from their phone. It didn't feel sad this time. It felt like Lorraine was still here, tucked somewhere between the notes and the steam on the windows. Later that evening, after everyone had eaten too much and the music had quieted into background murmur, I sat by the fireplace with a wool blanket and my second glass of wine. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. I ignored it. But when I finally glanced down, I saw the name Frank Deloqua. The preview of the message read, "You'll always be our daughter." I deleted it without opening. I didn't need their words anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't interested in a performance of reconciliation. What I had now was real, and I wasn't going to trade it for a seat at a table that had once served silence. As midnight approached, I stepped out onto the porch. The wind had calmed. Snowflakes fell slow and lazy. I carried a mug of mulled cider. Lorraine's old ceramic one, the handle slightly chipped, the glaze uneven. I set it down on the porch railing, letting the steam rise into the cold night. Inside, laughter echoed through the floorboards. I didn't rush back in. I stood still for a moment, watching the stars, the snow, the soft curl of warmth rising from that mug like breath from a memory. "I know you see this," I whispered, "and I know you're proud." The quietest victories often echo the loudest. Natalie didn't need to raise her voice. She let the truth speak through signatures, through silence, through a legacy no one could steal. Justice didn't arrive in a courtroom or a headline. It came in the form of presence. Her presence where they never expected her to return. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. If this story resonates with you, like, share, and leave a comment below. Drop a 1 if you've ever felt erased and stood your ground.